Good afternoon. My name is Maurice McDermott, and I'm President and CEO of the Whitty Museum. It's my great pleasure to introduce a powerful friend and an executive leader and a transformational leader in San Antonio, Tracy Goss. I'm going to do two things today. The first is I'm going to give the traditional credentials that Tracy Goss has, and they're impressive. And the second is I'm going to reveal some ways that Tracy Goss has been transformational in San Antonio. Tracy Goss is an internationally recognized consultant, author, and lecturer and the world's leading authority on executive reinvention. Her award-winning book, The Last Word on Power, Executive Reinvention for Leaders who must make the impossible happen, is a must-read for corporate executives and any leader who must acquire the power to go beyond continuous improvement and make the impossible a reality. Tracy herself asserts, whatever is impossible in your industry today, someone will make possible tomorrow and change that world. The only question is, will it be you or a competitor? Goss is president of Goss Reed Associates, a management consultant firm based in Austin, Texas, and New York City, which she founded with Sheila Reed. They specialize in working with chief executive officers and their senior management teams worldwide. So let me tell you personally my experience and our experience in San Antonio with Tracy Goss. I first met Tracy Goss 10 years ago. A great executive leader, Foley Klingman, said he would introduce me to Tracy only if the Whitty and I were serious, if we were serious about reinvention and transformation. My life and the Whitty's life has changed forever since then. Tracy has ushered me and the entire Whitty executive team into a new era. We sometimes call it the new Whitty, but really it is the Tracy era. We know that. But more important, really more important to know, is as we grew through reinvention process, we sat next to among the most, really the most transformational leaders in San Antonio, throughout San Antonio. These are executive leaders at the Pearl, a great transformational space that's changed forever, the middle of San Antonio. HEB, of course. HEB is the most transformational company in Texas and Mexico. Nature Suite, the San Antonio Independent School District. It is not a coincidence that the changes over the last 10 years in these companies and places are because of Tracy Goss. In fact, we realized that Tracy was, in fact, transforming the entire city and still is today. And I want to say there is so much more to accomplish. There's so much more to do. And so with that, I introduce to you Tracy Goss, San Antonio's hidden power.
Thank you, Maurice, for those very, very kind words. I appreciate it. I've had the opportunity to work with Maurice and the executives at the Whitty for close to 10 years now. And every time I work with them, I'm always inspired by them. Inspired not only by what they accomplish, and they accomplish a lot, and almost always they accomplish it under very challenging circumstances, but I'm inspired by who they are as human beings, and especially by the courage that they have for taking on impossible commitments for the Whitty. That kind of courage, that's what I'm here to talk about today. And I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you, Maurice, for inviting me to be part of this celebration and honoring of Graham Weston as the Whitty's trailblazer. Congratulations, Mr. Weston. The kind of courage that there is to talk about is a particular kind of courage. It's the courage that is not stopped by challenging circumstances. I mean, after all, the courage to grow old is all about the circumstance. Growing old is a circumstance, and a challenging circumstance. In fact, for many of us, it may be the most challenging circumstance that we ever encounter. I'm very fond of quoting Betty Davis, who was the first person to say, "Getting old ain't for sissies." And she's right, it's not. I first got involved in this conversation about the courage to grow old about 15 years ago. We were celebrating my birthday with my family and closest friends at a wonderful restaurant in the Upper West Side of New York City. And during dessert, I asked a question: occupational hazard consultants. I went around the table and I asked people, if you could have anything, anything that you wanted in your life right now, what would it be? Harold, one of my dearest and oldest friends from college, gave an answer that stayed with me all of these years, made an impact that night, and never left. It was Harold who said, what I really want is the courage to grow old. And we all just kind of stopped for a second to think about that. And I've thought about it a lot over these last 15 years. What is that, the courage to grow old? What might it mean? What might it look like? Well, in the last 2 years, I lost two of the people who were at that dinner, two of my very best friends in the world. One to cancer and one to a brain hemorrhage. At that point, Harold's words got very, very loud for me. I want the courage to grow old. When you start losing your contemporaries, your own mortality comes into question. But for me, there was another question that arose with this whole situation that was even stronger. Who was I going to be? How was I going to handle this ongoing loss? Because it was very clear that this is how it was going to be from here on. Losing the people that I spent my life with, losing the people that are my life. And coupled with that, the other losses that go with growing old. Nothing as significant as losing a loved one, but nonetheless very real. Losses like knees and hips that don't work like they used to, and the many losses that appear the minute you look in the mirror. So the question that was loudest for me is, who was I going to be in the face of growing old? I'm sure many of you have had a similar experience to mine. And if you haven't had it yet, you will. And then you'll start to hear this question. Who are you going to be? How are you going to relate to aging? Well, I mean, you could just get old. Or there is an alternative. With courage and resilience, you can have the last years of your life be the very best. Now, I'm not talking positive thinking. I'm not talking about having a good attitude. I'm not even talking about taking a point of view or acting as if. I'm saying that if you can transform your relationship with growing old, it can, no kidding, be the most fulfilling experience of your life. In my consulting engagements, first I need to say something, full disclosure. I am not an expert in the arena of growing old. I have no credentials other than, like everyone else, I am growing old every day. My area of expertise is transformational leadership and organizational reinvention. However, the courage that it takes to grow old requires a transformation, a specific transformation, a transformation in how you relate to the entire conversation about growing old. A transformation from growing old being the beginning of the end to transformation being the next space in your life, the next phase of your life. And like all the earlier ones, can be the most exciting and the most adventurous and certainly the most rewarding. You have a choice. And what I want to talk about today is what that choice is. You do have to choose, because in the absence of making a choice, there is a default choice, and that is you just grow old. You take the normal pathway, the traditional, predictable way that most people grow old. Marie said earlier that in my work as a consultant, I start by saying, whatever is impossible in your industry today, someone will make happen tomorrow and change that world. And the only question is Will it be you or will it be a competitor? And I'm here today to talk about the courage to grow old. But I have a question for you that's similar. A very small percentage of people will transform their relationship with growing old and have it be the best time of their life. The question is, will you be one of these people? Or will you opt to go the traditional, normal, predictable pathway to getting old? I'll say it again, and I'll say it a lot. You do have a choice. I'm excited to put an alternative pathway in front of you today and invite you to consider this pathway as opposed to just waiting to see what happens and letting life take you where it does. I'm going to do this through 3 questions. I'm going to give you 3 questions to hang out with, or as the philosophers say, to dwell in, or as the poets say, learn to love the questions. And maybe, without even noticing it, you will hear the answers. In any case, I'm going to give you 3 questions. But before I do that, there's another reason I'm very excited about being here today, and I want you to know that, because it's about the courage that I have found in the leaders in San Antonio. I define courage as stepping forward, the willingness to step forward, like a soldier steps forward onto the battlefield, or a new parent willingly steps forward into parenting, or first responders willingly step forward into a burning building. It's that kind of courage. San Antonio has that kind of courage. Here, it looks like taking on education, or taking on the homeless, or stepping forward to deal with poverty, or starting new businesses and helping new business leaders. Or in today's world, it looks like stepping forward to make sure that people who don't have food because of COVID-19 are fed and taken care of. That kind of courage is the same kind of courage that it takes to grow old. Truth is, I have fallen in love with San Antonio. The city, with its people, and especially with its leaders. Now, I am a born and bred true New Yorker, and I am blessed with the opportunity to deliver transformational leadership and organizational reinvention throughout the world. Yet it is San Antonio that I fell in love with. And over the past 25 years, I have spent almost my entire professional time working here. The reason for that, the leaders of San Antonio. What is different and what is unique about them. In most organizations, corporate or entrepreneurial, it is my experience, and whether it's in the US or Europe or Asia, South America, the UK, anywhere in the world, if you put 25 to 30 leaders, executives, owners, partners, senior people in a room, maybe you'll find 3, at the most 4, people who are really interested in making a difference, in changing the world in which they live and work, not to mention changing the lives of the people with whom they engage. In San Antonio, in the companies that I have worked with, I have found that all of the leaders have that commitment. And not just to their organization, not just to their people. They have that commitment to their customers, to their customers' families, to the families of the people that work for them, to their children, to their children's children, to all the children in San Antonio, and to the city of San Antonio. It's really quite remarkable and very unique. Now, another disclosure. Since most of the companies and leaders that I work with have come to me through Fully Klingman, it's maybe not a surprise that they're all up to something, because Fully does not engage with anybody or anything that is not about changing the world, changing the lives of people, and changing and transforming San Antonio. But what's amazing is it doesn't matter what field or what world these people are in, whether it's hospitality, agriculture, education, retail, healthcare, the city, museums, technology, all of them are committed to changing their world. And as human beings, they are very, very engaged with changing people's lives. They are the kinds of leaders that Tom Luce referred to as people who are committed to and are out there for the common good. The source of this, yes, it's commitment, but even more so, I say it's courage. Courage as it relates to growing old is the willingness to step forward into the future that you know, the future that you don't know, and the future that you don't know you don't know. So here are the three questions. These will give you access to the courage to step forward into the future of growing old. Question number one, and this is the choice question. Do you want to get old in the normal, traditional, usual way? Or do you want to step forward into the future and create the kind of experience that you really want to have in your final year? Now, engaging with this question requires that you really examine and look into what is this normal pathway, the normal way, the usual way, the traditional way of getting old. What does it look like? Okay, here it is. By the way, if you don't choose, this is the one that you choose by default. So here it is. Growing up as a child is quite a normal thing. It's just a normal, natural part of life. You leave elementary school and go to high school, and you're growing older and entering a new phase of life. And you leave high school and go on to college or the workforce, and you're growing older and entering a new phase of life. At some point, you choose a career path. And again, you're growing older and entering the next phase of life. At yet another point in time, you complete your career path. And yes, again, you're getting older and entering into yet another phase of life. However, somewhere around the time when you're completing your professional career, getting older starts to lose the excitement that it's always had. And getting older starts to be more like going from growing older to getting older. And then getting older morphs into getting old. And getting old starts to become being old. For most people, when you reach this experience of being old, it is that drama of like the beginning of the end. And that's the normal pathway that people take. When you don't think about it, when you don't engage in a conscious choice, that's what going old looks like. Now, this usual path doesn't take courage. It doesn't take anything. You just have to hang out and let life do what it does to you. You like what you like, which diminishes over time, and you don't like what you don't like, and you complain about what you don't like that you don't like, and that increases over time. Now, the only good thing about that is there are an awful lot of other people who are complaining about what they don't like. So you do have lots of company. But that's what that process looks like. Now, I acknowledge there are lots of good things about getting old. And there are people who claim to really like being old and getting older. But I don't believe them. I suggest that if we were given a choice to live to be 100 and grow old naturally, or live to be 100 and be, say, as we are around 45 or 50, most all of us would choose the latter. However, as far as I know, that option is not available to us. So, the alternative pathway that allows you to escape the limits of normal and traditional route is learnable and doable for anyone. But it ain't easy. And it ain't easy because the world has agreed that once you complete your professional career, you're now moved into a new place and you stop dealing with growing and you're encouraged to relax, sit back, just kind of take it easy and accept moving into being old and eventually dying. Well, grow is the important word here. Everyone gets old, if you're lucky. But growing takes courage. The courage to willingly step forward into the future and create the experience that you want to have during these years. Now, there's one thing I have to add to that that changes the importance of the whole sentence. It's to step forward, create the experience that you want to have during these years, regardless of the circumstances. I want to say that again. Regardless of the circumstances. The circumstances determine the quality of life for just about everyone on the planet. And circumstances is where transformation and growing old meet. For just about everybody, how they determine the quality of their life is based on the circumstances. If you're asked the question, how's your life? Well, if it was a good year and you got a promotion or a raise and your health is good, your children are doing fine, maybe you bought a new house or a new car, you probably say it was great, it was a great year. Or in another year, like for many people this year, if you lost your job or one or more of your family members have been laid off or furloughed, or you're dealing with medical conditions with not many resources, or you're concerned about the mortgage on your house, your children are having trouble in school, well, then your answer is much likely to be, it's been a tough year. Or maybe it's been a really bad year. Or maybe I don't know how much longer I can deal with these circumstances. Sound familiar? Well, growing old is a circumstance, and it's a circumstance in the category of something you have nothing to say about. If you're lucky, you will grow old. But you have everything to say about who you're going to be in the face of these circumstances. Now, we all know how life turns out. We all know we're going to die. At some point, we're going to die, go into the ground, and they'll throw dirt on our face. There's nothing we can do about that. That will happen. What we can do something about is who are you going to be between the time growing old starts to be less exciting and you go into the ground and they throw dirt on your face. That's the invitation that I'm offering you. Engaging with this first question about choosing between the traditional route and this alternative route that I'm offering you, it's one of the places that resilience is really important. I really liked Dr. Poyo's definition of resilience. Human ability to carry on in positive ways despite traumatic misfortune or abuse. The personal and emotional reserves needed to move on during challenging times. Well, growing old is most certainly a challenging time. As resilience applies to growing old, I like to say that it's the ability to recover quickly and to spring back, to recover quickly from what you think it means to grow old and the decisions and actions and thoughts and feelings and everything that goes with it when you start thinking about what it means to grow old. And to spring back away from those thoughts, away from the past, into taking an action that can forward the experience that you want to have in your older years. And that's really takes us to our second question. What is the experience that you want to have? You know, before we get into the second question, there's one thing I want to say. As you get into this first question about choosing, please know you will encounter experiences from the past. You'll remember things like maybe times when you took a chance, when you took a risk, and you didn't take the traditional pathway. And there were consequences to it. Maybe you still have some of the scars from it. Don't let that stop you. Don't get stuck in experiences from the past. Stay in the question. Stay engaged with looking at the choice. Now, this is when resilience is needed, when you get pulled back. It's important to recover quickly from the decisions that we made from the past. If you get stuck in those experiences and you start to lean in the direction of, I'll just get old. Fine, I'll just get old. I want to warn you, if you take the traditional pathway and you hated high school, you will really hate getting old. There is some good news. The good news is that you have some choices now that you didn't have in high school. We didn't know in high school that there was a choice about whether to have our actions and our commitments shaped by what people thought about us or what we thought they thought about us, or to have them shaped by something that we really wanted. We didn't know there was a choice, and so there wasn't. We were totally caught up in what people thought about us. And we certainly didn't have the capacity for resilience. We did not have the ability to recover quickly from not being on the football team, or the cheerleading squad, or the debate team, or prom queen, or whatever your story was. So high school for most of us was difficult. We didn't know how to engage in creating the kind of experience that we wanted to have for our high school years. So now we have some more tools. You have the ability to acquire at least a level of competency with the skill of resilience, and perhaps even excellence or mastery. And it's a skill that you will need as you grow old. Okay, on to the second question. The second question is what I call the Spice Girls question. And it is exactly, what is the experience during these older years that you want? Tell me what you want, what you really, really want. What is the experience that you really want? And let's just pause for a minute, because I'm asking you to answer this question with a lot of answers, to not jump to a conclusion. It's the kind of question that when you're asked, you immediately go to what you think the answer is. It's like if you said to me, Tracy, I'm going to move, and I'm trying to decide where I want to move. And I said, well, if you could live anywhere, where would you move to? You said, oh, well, if I could live anywhere, I would move to the top apartment in my building. I'd like to live up there. I said, great. But if you could live anywhere, where would you move? Oh, anywhere. Well, in that case, I'd move across the city. There's a neighborhood across the city that I think is just fabulous, and that's where I'd go. Yeah, but if you could live anywhere, where would you go? Anywhere? Oh, well, In that case, I'd move to California. I always wanted to go to the West Coast. No, no, if you could go anywhere, anywhere, anywhere. Well, I think I'd go to the south of France. And it goes on and on and on like that. So when you answer this question about what is the experience that you really want in these later years of your life, go through a lot of answers. First, you'll go through all of the fancy ones, all of the wish lists. I want the experience of fame, or the experience of wealth, or the experience of power. And when you get through with that list, then there's the practical one. No, what I want is to be healthy. Or what I really want is happiness or true love. And you'll go through all of those. And if you keep answering and you keep answering and you keep answering, at some point you will get, I promise you this, you will get to the place where you say, what I really want, the experience I really want in this part of my life is to know that I matter, is to be connected with the magnificence of other human beings, to give and receive love, and to express the gratitude and sheer joy that the privilege of being alive is. Now, you may not use any of those words or say that in any way that I did, but however you say it, that's the territory that you'll be speaking into. So please, as you dwell in this question, keep going until you get what for you are the words that say that territory. Once you've answered that question, then you're ready to engage with the third question. Now, the third question, this is the heart of the matter. This is the heart of the alternative approach to growing old. This is what gives you access to the courage needed to transform your relationship with growing old. And the third question is this: what do you want to use your life for? What do you want to use the rest of your life for? What game do you want to replace the game of surviving and struggling with circumstances and complaining about how bad it is to get old and everything else that doesn't work? Because that's the default pathway. And if you don't replace it, it's the only game in town. So what do I want to use the rest of my life for? It's question number 3. Whether you realize it or not, you have been engaged with this choice for a lot of years. You've been engaged with, do you have the courage to step forward into what's next all of your life? When you're growing up as a child, courage looks like going to school and socializing. In relationships, courage looks like dealing with whatever comes into the relationship. When you're growing old, courage looks like the willingness to step into the future. By future, I just don't mean step into a bunch of things that are going to happen. By future, I mean step into a future that doesn't exist, a future that you invent, a future that is something that is larger than you are, a future that has a longer stream of time than your lifetime. That's the kind of future I'm talking about. A future that doesn't happen to you, but a future that you create. A larger stream of time than your lifetime is a really important aspect of this invented future. Without it, you naturally think of the future as a series of diminishments, and that time is running out. The specific invented future that you create is one that will give rise to the experience that you want to live life in and from. The experience that was the conclusion of question number 2. The heart of this alternative pathway is this invented future. The courage that arises with creating and taking on an invented future, this courage allows you to live from that future and not from the circumstances that life gives you. Now, the best example of an invented future that I can give you is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He created an invented future where race would not matter, where all people were equal. Now, he called it a dream. I call it an invented future. It doesn't matter what you call it. It's a future that is larger than any one person. It's a future that can't possibly happen in your lifetime. It's too big. It's a future that seems impossible. And it's a future for which you have great passion. The future that I'm talking about is not something that you try to accomplish like a result. It's so much bigger than that. Because it can't be accomplished in your lifetime, you're freed up from the concerns about succeeding or failing. It holds lots of successes and lots of failures. It's a future that shapes your actions, that makes your choices, and that expresses your passion now in the present. A future that gets you up in the morning. I call this alternative pathway, this invented future, a life game. A game that you say is worth playing, regardless of how often you fail. A game that you say is worth giving the rest of your life to. A life game. If you view what Dr. King gave his life to as a result or a goal, the conclusion you have to come to is that he failed. But it wasn't a goal. It was so much larger than that. It was a realm of possibility, something that did not exist at all at the time, for which there was no reality. What he did accomplish in his lifetime was to have this future that he invented, this dream, become so real that not only did it go beyond his life stream, but now there are thousands of people all over the world who have this as their invented future, who use their life to move forward this possibility to a reality. And someday it will be exactly that, a reality. While an invented future is essential to access the courage to grow old, at least in this pathway, it's not something that has to be associated with age. You can create an invented future at any age. And Dr. King's life was a good example of that as well. He did not create an invented future as a context for growing old. Unfortunately, he didn't have the opportunity to grow old. But he had created his life game at such an early age that he got to live every moment of every day, coming from it and into it. And that allowed him to fully use the time he had in service of his commitment, to not get pulled into the trivia of the many circumstances that were coming at him. Now, somebody who did create a life game as a context for growing old is Benjamin Franklin. In 1776, Benjamin Franklin was 70 years old. Now, in those days, 70 years old was really old. Imagine starting a revolution at 70 years old, an invented future that resulted in a new nation. All right, I've said a lot of stuff today. So let me say again the elements that make up an invented future, because that's what I'd like you to take with you, to think about what is the invented future, what is the life game that's larger than you, that can be the context for accessing the kind of courage that's needed to grow old. So here are the elements. A game worth playing, regardless of whether you succeed or fail. something that does not currently exist and is considered to be impossible, something that is larger than you or larger than any one person, something that is on a time stream that goes far beyond your time stream in life, and something that you are passionate about. Now, some examples might be a future in which San Antonio or Texas or even the country has ensured that every child has an excellent education and will have a future without limitations. Or San Antonio as a city without poverty. Or San Antonio as a city that has eliminated hunger or eliminated homelessness. Or you could take on somebody else's game and have that be yours. You could step forward and take on a world where everyone is equal, regardless of race or gender. Or you could join Graham Weston's game, the person we're honoring today, of having San Antonio be a better city, of doing extraordinary things so that entrepreneurs can flourish in the city. Or you could join Mr. Luce's game, his project Texas 2036. You could accept his request to be a trailblazer for the common good. It's endless. But I encourage you to start thinking about it. What do you want to use your life for? And what game do you want to take on? So I'm going to leave you with these 3 questions. Remember, this invented future, it's a game that makes your heart sing, gets you up in the morning. A game that has you use your life in service of something. So I'm going to repeat the questions. Question number 1, choice. Do you want to get old in the normal, traditional, predictable way? Or do you want to step forward and willingly take on acquiring the courage to create being old as the most exciting time of your life? Question number 2, the Spice Girls question. What is the experience that you want to have in your older years? What do you really, really want? What is that experience? And question number 3, what are you going to do with your life? What are you going to use the rest of your life for? We all get one life, and we get to say what we're going to use it for. So what is your idea of a good time, where the breakdowns are as exciting as the breakthroughs? Those are the 3 questions. Now, there's one more thing I want to leave you with, and that is some practices for building your resilience muscles, because resilience is what's going to pull you back when you get pulled by the circumstances away from your invented future and away from your life game. So I'm going to give you 3 practices. And these are practices that will build those muscles. They'll be there for you. They're simple, but they are powerful. Practice number 1, don't have expectations. Expectations have one purpose, and that is that they are a setup for disappointment and being upset. If you don't have expectations, you don't get to be right about anything. And if you don't have expectations, you don't get to make other people wrong about anything. Now, do have commitments, but have commitments that move forward your invented future. And when you do have expectations, and you will, practice resilience. Recover quickly and spring back to take an action that forwards your invented future. Practice number 2. Use complaints as the opportunity to expand your circle of awareness and gratitude. Here's what I mean. If you have lost the ability to taste, use that as a reminder that you can eat. And how wonderful is that? And that is definitely something to be grateful for. Or if you can't walk or move as fast as you'd like, use that as a reminder. Use the pain in your knees and in your hips and in your ankles as a reminder that you can walk. And how is that for something terrific? That's something to be grateful for. So take these opportunities to turn complaints into an expanded awareness and be present to the privilege that it is just to be alive. The third practice. The third practice is to take this stand. What other people think about you is none of your business. When other people give you their opinions about what you are doing or not doing, or what you should be doing or shouldn't be doing, don't get hooked. Don't get caught into their conversation. Simply say, thank you for sharing. And then take an action that forwards your invented future. And when you do get hooked, and you will, practice resilience, recover quickly, and spring back into an action that forwards your life game. And the very last thing I want to say, the day that you say the best years of your life are over is the day you are old. You don't stop playing big in life because you get old. You get old because you stop playing big in life. And the very, very last thing is thank you for me. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. And thank you for the opportunity to share my thinking about the courage to grow old with you.